Hello and welcome back to the Red Special Guitar Podcast with me, your host, John Underhill. Now, in today's episode, we have a wonderful guest all the way from the United States of America, who is someone I've been looking forward to getting in touch with and getting hold of for some time. And it's a really wonderful chat with some great information, unlocking some new information, and explaining some of the myths around the Red Special, and especially the John Page Fender Red Special replica. It also ties in really nicely with our previous episode with Julian Hemingway. Now, before we get into this episode, I just wanted to have a quick shout out about some new podcast merch that we've got coming out soon. We've got brand new Red Special Guitar podcast coins, which will be available in the next few weeks. We've also got a limited number run of It's Slate, as coined by Brian Harold May himself, podcast slates, where proceeds of each will be going to, or a donation for every purchase made will be going to Brian May's Save Me Trust. So it's well worth getting hold of. The slates are a limited number, and the coins I also have a limited number of as well. And they're absolutely fantastic. I love them. It's a great time getting hold of those. And then the other thing I want to mention before we dive into the episode is the upcoming Red Special Guitar meetups. Now, in the month of April, we will see the next, I think the third US Phoenix Red Special Guitar meetup with my friend Luke Holwerder, and a bit later on in the year we've also got the East Coast US Red Special Guitar Meetup in the end of September, October time for Woody Thomas, and then the UK Red Special Guitar Meetup, the one to go to, the hottest ticket there is, been sold out pretty quickly, which was a bit of a shock to us all, but amazing news that has been sold out. We are looking at seeing if there is anything we can do to increase numbers at the venue and to see what we can do, but we'll more on that later. But thank you so much for everyone who is coming to that and has bought a ticket. It means the world that you want to come, and I'm really sorry that we can't get more of you in, but we need to make sure that the event is safe and secure, and to do that properly we have to have the right things in place, and we're currently working to see if there's some other things that we can do. So please bear with us and make sure you fill in the waiting list form, ticket dropouts, just so we know. And if also you want to get hold of a ticket, if we are able to increase the venue size or increase capacity, then please do make sure your name is on that, because that's the list we'll be going from. So if you're not down on that, please make sure that you are. Yeah, enough rambling from me. Make sure you've got a drink, make sure you're relaxed, make sure you're sitting comfortably, as I'd like to introduce Everett Wood to the Red Special Guitar Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen of the Red Special Guitar Podcast, today I am honoured to welcome a gentleman from my original days on the Red Special Forum, which was actually the Brian May World Forum, a man who's gone on to do many great things and has many stories to tell, which hopefully he'll share with us today. He's coming to us all the way from Tennessee in the US. Mr. Everett Wood. Everett, how are you?
I'm pretty good, John. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to say hello to everybody that's going to be watching after it's all published and so on. And I hope everybody gets a chance to learn a couple things, and I'm probably going to learn a couple things. So let's have a good time today.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I know it's when I reached out, it was a little while ago, but we finally arranged a time when convenient to chat. So thank you for your time, because I know you're busy doing other things these days.
Yeah, I'm getting towards the end of my career with General Motors, and I'm in a plant that is called a critical status, and I've been working for months and months, with no time off. And I know we were supposed to do this a couple times before, and it all got pushed back. So we'll blame it all on General Motors.
Yeah, good. But you're well. You look really well, and
I'm doing well for a man my age.
No, you look fine. But so Everett, for those that don't know you, you've had a long but a history of making guitars and working in the Brian May guitar world in America. But first and foremost, what started it all off? Can you remember the first Queen song you ever heard?
Oh, that would have to go back to, I was probably around 13 or 14, and Queen was doing a tour in the United States, and a friend of mine who had a brother that was a little bit older than us, he was maybe 16 or 17, and he had turned us on to some of the music off of Sheer Heart Attack. And then we were in art class in high school, and we had a teacher. She was kind of what do you call, like a hippie. She was an older woman, and she was always telling us, bring in, whatever kind of music you like. She wanted everybody to hear everything. And somebody had a copy of Sheer Heart Attack. And the beginning of that album, I don't know, the sound, the way it was produced and everything, it just really captured me. And I became a fan right then. So, 50 years ago, it was quite a long time ago.
So at that point, were you playing guitar, or were you just a fan of music, or was it a real awakening for you to opening your eyes to and your ears to music?
Well, I've never ever been a good guitar player. I'll tell anybody that. Anybody that's met me at a guitar show and they noticed that I had my guitar player Deanna Passarella with us. She was a lot prettier than me, and she played guitar 1,000 times better. So she was the natural for being there. But I just never had the time to become a good guitar player, which is kind of weird because two of my brothers were musicians for a long time. But I kind of chose a different path and had to kind of grow up a little bit faster than everybody else.
So did you, so looking at your, when you first heard Sheer Heart Attack, did you then ask who's this band and try and find more albums and songs, or was it just that one album that caught your ear?
Well, the Sheer Heart Attack album was released, and then like I said, I had a friend who had a little older brother, and so he had the first two Queen albums. And I remember, we'd go over and sneak into his room and get the records, go down in the basement and play them and so on. And then, you had to save your allowance and so on, and then you could buy the next album that was coming out or something that you really liked. But yeah, it's been a lifelong love affair.
Definitely worthwhile as well. And so what point did you pick the guitar up? Was that after that, or were you already playing? I know you said you don't play very well, but clearly you must have picked a guitar up at some point and got interested in it. Was that later on, or was that the same time?
When I was first part of high school, my younger brother, he funny thing, he kind of looked like Paul Stanley from Kiss. He had the long dark hair that was curly, and the girls went crazy for him. And he was a guitar player and a singer in a local band. And so I got more into the equipment side of it, and it fascinated me. I have an electrical background. That's what I do for a living. And sound reinforcement, I was going to be a sound engineer when I was younger, but, life takes over, and that didn't work out. But I've always had a fascination with all of it. And then later on in life, I started buying and selling guitars. And that's when I got the most exposure to the whole business side of it.
Can you remember when you first learned that Brian, obviously Queen's been an influence on you, and you're a bit later on in life, but Can you remember when you learnt that Brian had made the guitar himself with his dad?
Well, here we go back to this is long before the internet, and you would have to. Here's a perfect example. You would have to save your money and go to a store and buy a magazine. And back then it was Cream Magazine or Hit Parader or Melody Maker, Rolling Stone. And if you were lucky, they would have a short interview and maybe some photos. And I remember when Queen started to break big, you know, there was, I think it was Guitar Magazine in 1973. They did a one-on-one interview. Jeffrey something, I can't remember the guy's last name, but he did a really nice interview where Brian talked about how the guitar was built. Him and his father had, built it out of just household things and no power tools, and how long it took and the different things that they tried. I mean, even if you look in his book, you can see, some of the photos of the guitar when it's in pieces. There you can see they had made changes. There was the original tremolo with the little roller bearings and so on, and then they came up with the knife edge and so on. But that magazine and the way that they described everything, and there was actually photos of the tremolo and so on, where they were doing the test with the neck. And I mean, that was groundbreaking. That tremolo system was 25 years ahead of its time, and nobody knew it. I mean, if it's brand new and nobody's thought of it before, nobody knows. And to have a true floating tremolo back in those days, and that came out of somebody's little workshop in a bedroom, is just unbelievable. And to read all that back then and to think about it now, because it's history now, it's amazing. It was amazing back then, and nobody that was out on the road making money as a guitar player was playing a guitar they made at home. And everybody had the Telecasters and the Fender Strats and the Les Pauls and SGs and so on. And here you had a couple of guys that really didn't know that much about building a guitar, but they knew what they wanted to have it when it was finished. And all that came together way back then. And that little bit of information that trickled out, to me, it was just amazing.
So
I hope I didn't ramble too far.
No, not at all. It's really good. It's really interesting to know, like, because I've interviewed lots of people now, and to know what's where not everyone finds the information out and then does something with it immediately. Some people, I think, and you're probably one of them, Everett, would be that piece of information you learnt back in the 70s was then a seed planted in your mind, and then it took a few years later from what I'd imagine you're going to say for you to water it, for it to grow into making you do something with it.
Well, that information kind of trickled out in 73, like I think it was August of 73, it was printed. And Mark Reynolds actually posted it online years ago. And I'm sure, everybody in the world found that little bit of information and that history and just thought it was crazy. But, and then, so you're talking about 73 and 10 years go by and the Guild guitar comes out, and the early ones, they were supposedly to be, a reproduction of the original. And everybody that was a fan, I mean, I was in the Navy back then, and there was no way I was coming up for, the money to pay for one of those. So, the people that got them, I don't think they truly understood them. And because that guitar is not built like a regular guitar. You can see that with the birch, and I'll show you some examples of what John Page and John Scher were doing back in 83, 84, when they were supposedly, building a reproduction for Brian. And because they were schooled in the art of building guitars, they were going to put those standards into Brian's guitar, and it just doesn't fit. And we had the same thing when I met Stephen Fazio, and we did the whole CNC thing and put everything together, and he's a trained luthier, and we got the first one done, and we went up and looked at it, and I was like, well, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is definitely not. He's like, that's the way you're supposed to build a guitar. Well, this isn't a regular guitar. This is something that was put together in a bedroom and put together with household items. And you're not going to see those standards. You're going to see stuff that came out of a Hofner. You're going to see stuff that came out of a Fender, and it seemed like every time Brian would have something done, there was some Gibson in there, especially with the John Birch guitar. I really saw a lot of that.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of people there, Everett. We'll go through all of them if that's all right. So you mentioned John Page, and I know that guitar came up in our podcast with Julian Hemingway recently, where Julian had actually sent some pickups over, he believed, which ended up possibly in the John Birch guitar.
Well, officially, they're not in that guitar at this moment.
Right.
I have the guitar apart because I had to do a little maintenance to it, and I wanted to show, as an example, some of the things that Fender was doing, because Fender does something the Fender way.
Yeah.
And that was one of the reasons why Fender turned down the idea. I mean, John Page, he was working with everybody. And, they had a good association with Queen through John Deacon and so on. And when Brian had met him, when they were in the studio, they started talking about, how the guitar was built and everything. And he's like, I need another one. And John Page was like, well, we're going to do it exactly like you and your father did. And they were headed down that road. And then there was, some things that they were doing that they were Fender things, because that's the way they were taught. The neck joint. The original neck joint was not going to be used in the reproduction that Fender was making. It was close, but not exactly the same thing.
So how did you meet John Page? That's always been something that I found interesting. I remember talking to you probably 15 years ago about the guitar, and seeing you on brianmayworld.com on the old red and black old forum. And I know there's a YouTube video out there which we'll link somewhere, where you're describing the guitar at NAMM to a reporter. But how did you originally meet John Page, and then what did that lead on to? Because from memory,
well, the story of John Page, it all goes back to eBay. Everybody loves eBay. You can find anything on eBay. And this magazine I bought for $1. I think it was $1 and free shipping. So this magazine shows up in my mail, a week or so later, and I'm home and alone. Nobody's there to bother me. I'm going to sit down and read this article. And when is it? This is February 1983, and I'll send you a couple pictures you can show people. And it's mysteriously about an interview with Max Kay, where they're talking about the guitar and so on. And I bet you Brian had probably told that story 100,000 times everybody's got the same questions when you do the interviews and so on. But he was talking about this whole chain of events. And, I have no idea how many people read this, but when I read this, it said that he had been contacted by a Japanese company, Greco, about doing a Brian May guitar, and they sent him one, which I'm sure everybody's seen on the videos and so on. And at that point, Brian was like, if we're going to do this, let's do something right. And they were like, we're already doing this, why should we even bother? And so nothing ever happened with that. Well, John Page had gone to the studios in California, and he was doing some work with the cars, and they stopped in to see John Deacon, and because he was using some Fender stuff back then. And the whole story was, Brian showed him the guitar, and they were talking about how it was built, and he built it at home and so on. And then he said, I had a John Perch copy, and I smashed it one night, which was very unusual for me. It was a combination of circumstances. I was pretty much under stress. I broke a lot of strings that night, and my own guitar had gotten knocked over, and I lost the machine head. And if you look in the pictures, that's when it's got the chrome G string tuner. Yeah. I said, let's see. Luckily, he didn't throw the original off. I had discussions to have one built that sounded like mine with John Page from the Fender Research and Development Department. I broke the other one, and I called John, and I said, well, how about it? And John Page said, well, if we make you a nice copy and so on, it'll be just exactly like the original, very, very close to the original. The same wood, the same materials, same measurements, and whereas John Birch was an attempt to make a better guitar than what the original was. And that's where you see a lot of the Gibson stuff.
Yeah.
So, but he said the Fender replacement is going to be, absolutely identical to the original with all its faults. And if you're a guitar builder, you look at that, you're going to go, oh yeah, this is wrong, that's wrong. It can't be that wrong, because you've got a guitar that's been touring the world for over 60 years with one of the most famous guitar players in the whole world. Everybody knows Brian. So I had read this whole chain of events, and I was and actually been talking with Chris Mahoney at the time, and we were talking about the John Birch guitar. And I had said to myself, well, here's the last guy that saw that guitar. Because there was always stories that it went to Guild, somebody at Guild had stole it, or it had been thrown away, during the business transfers and so on. But every bit of that was true. The story I was told was Guild never actually saw the guitar, ever. But anyways, the deal was made where John Page was going to build this guitar, and well, let me supersede something here. I thought to myself when I got that information and read this that, you know, going to be like a little detective, you know, we're going to solve this mystery. It's worth a phone call to Fender. That's what I thought. So I got on the phone and I called Fender, over to the custom shop, and spoke to somebody there, can't remember who, and said, I'm looking for John Page. And they were like, John Page quit. He's out of the guitar business. He doesn't want to be bothered anymore. You know, I don't know what's the matter with you people. You can't take a hint. I guess people that, had been trying to contact him for many, many years. And so I told him the story. I said, well, look, I'm doing some research on this guitar, and maybe thinking maybe I'll be able to write an article, and send it into, Guitar Player or somebody. And they said, well, we'll take your information, we'll pass it along. If he wants to speak to you, he can make that decision. We don't want any part of it. Okay. Well, a few days later, I get a phone call from John Page. And so I just came out, I'm like, you were the last one to see this guitar. And there are so many rumors, and there's so many stories, and there's fables, and nobody knows exactly what happened. You're the last man in the line. And he said, it's all got thrown away. And I thought, well, what do you mean? This is the end of the story. He said, Brian had sent me the guitar and some prints and some other stuff. And we started building a guitar, and there was a fire. I think every bit of it got burned up in the fire. We did save some things, but I have no idea. You're talking about stuff that happened 20 plus years ago. And John was actually very, very nice about every bit of it, but he kept, saying the same thing. It was such a long time ago. I've had so many things happen to me. I really can't tell you. And so I thought, well, it was a dead end. And a few days later, I get another phone call, and it's John Page. And he says, are you at home? Can you get on your computer? And I said, well, yeah. He goes, look in your email and I'll call you back. So, I get online, and there's pictures of the John Birch guitar, the famous ones of the guitar laying in the case, broken in pieces. And John called me back, and he's like, I started thinking, and it was in a storeroom, and it's been in a storeroom for decades. He goes, I feel really bad about this because I told Brian May the last time that we were together, because he was so excited about the way things were going and how much progress we had made. He said it brought back a lot of the memories of when him and his father were building the guitar, which I could understand that, because, it's part of his life. And so he's like, I feel bad about this. I want to get this guitar returned to him. I don't have any idea how it ended up in a storeroom, but this guitar has been sitting in a case for decades. So I reached out to Queen's management, and he had, what was that website he used to have? The Soapbox. Yeah, I got a hold of Jackie through the soapbox, and the title was "I Found the Birch Guitar," and I sent her pictures, and I mean it blew up. I had no idea people could search you down, on the internet, and I had people calling, people emailing, and so on. I want that guitar. And I'm like, number one, I don't have the guitar. Number two, you're not getting the guitar. If anybody's getting it, Brian May's getting it. And through talking with Jackie and the management company and so on, and John Page was directly involved, we made sure the guitar was returned to Brian's. And then Andrew Guyton ended up fixing it. You saw it at the meetup, didn't you?
Yeah, he's been to one of them. He's put it back together again and restored it relatively close to how it was. And I think they you can still see some of the damage from it, so you can see where it's been restored so it works, but you can still see how it where it was broken, which is nice because I think it's part of the history of it rather than making it. I think
it got messed up pretty bad.
And I think it's currently, the last time it was spotted was in a music, what am I trying to say? Like a display in Liverpool about Queen, which is where I think it was last seen, which was last year at some point.
Yeah. And I mean, it's part of the history. And it was, I was really dumbfounded when I got those pictures. And so I had been in touch with John, and we stayed in touch. And a bit of time had gone by. The guitar was shipped back to England and so on. And then one day I was at work, and John Page called me, and he's like, the neck and some of the information that I had from this guitar. And I said, well, yeah, you told me every bit of it got destroyed. There was a fire. And he said, well, we had some body blanks made up, and they were working on a bridge. And the neck, the last time they'd done anything with the neck, he had taken the neck to Brian's place in LA, where they were having a barbecue. And Brian was really happy, he's like, this is just the way me and my father did it, And, after that day, John Page went back to work, and all hell had broken loose. Fender was laying off people by the hundreds. And he had some stuff with his personal life that just didn't work out. And, he just packed everything up, put it someplace for storage, and he went out on the road. He was like, oh, I'm going to be a rock star. Well, that didn't work out. So I guess a year and a half, 2 years had gone by, and he got offered to come back to Fender. And but they told him, you're gonna have to launch the custom shop. That's when they were getting into that, and they were doing some stuff with the Japanese models. He was in really a big part of that. So everything just sat. They never went and got back to it. The neck from that day that he showed it to Brian had sat, in the same state for 25, 26 years. And then it ended up here. John said, look, you have a really big interest in this. And if you want to finish what I started, then I would, just let you finish it. He goes, I don't have any interest in this. This is not what I do. At this time, he was doing really uh, high-end tables and furniture and so on. And wasn't long after we had talked, he thought about, he's like, I think I'm going to try guitars again. And he started up John Page Guitars, which wasn't, a huge success. And but he was always there if I had a question. I got this information. Came in, well, I put it in this nice book. It was actually a green notebook, a student notebook. And it had all the information they had taken from the Red Special. And John Page is like, if you think you can do this, then, I'd rather you do it than it not get done at all. So that's how that all started, and it came in little bits and pieces and some big envelopes full of information, and it took almost 2 years to go through all those prints and everything and make sure that this was supposed to be the guitar that they were working on. So kind of a long story, but
a really interesting one there, Everett. There's so many, it's.
I mean, poor John Page. I would call him up. I hadn't spoken to him in 6 months, and call him up, and I'm like, what does this mean? And there's a picture of a neck, and then there's some numbers and so on. I said, what does this mean? You wrote it down. It means something. He's like, show it to me. Let me think. Oh, that's where the bridge is supposed to be. That's here. I racked his brain, and he was always really informative. I know he had to sit and think about some things, but if he would have just said, this is what you got, go ahead and get it, then we wouldn't have been successful at all.
Sounds like a lovely chap and a chance meeting, but the right person at the right time, and being able to get that rapport with him for him to want to share the information with you. What a fantastic story.
Even though, there was a little bit of tragedy there with some things that were going on with his life, life worked out well for him. And still today, John's producing guitars, and I follow a lot of his work, and it's amazing. It's just totally amazing. And I don't know what happened with Fender. Maybe he just got tired and walked away. Nobody, who knows? But the guitar world lost somebody when he walked away from the business.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that he came back to it, because it makes it a better business.
Sounds like you helped him come back as well. So that's all credit to you, sir.
Well, I got a small little credit, but just the idea that somebody with that much knowledge is still doing it, and he's enjoying it. I watch him online, and some of the stuff he does is just unbelievable. True craftsman.
Yeah. Ideal. We'll have to try and find him, track him down. Maybe you can help me get in touch with him, see if he'd be interested in coming on and telling his story. That would be.
He probably, he might. Who knows?
We'll see. Well, anyway, so that would be really cool. But so you've got this information, and you said you spent 2 years going through it with the help of John and like piecing it together. What did you actually get from him? Was it just the neck and some hardware and a body, or was it like, what stage was it in when it came to you?
The biggest part of it, the neck, was, like I said, it had not had any of the inlays in. What was it? Oh, we put the original style volute in it to make it a little more like the original.
Yeah.
I have no idea what the thinking was with the Martin style, diamond shaped volute, but especially when they had the John Birch guitar there. You know, who knows? People, there was more than one person working on it, and it was kind of like a little project that they were doing at the custom shop along with everything else that they were doing on a daily basis. So uh, stuff could have sat for quite a long time and then get back to it. But yeah, we got the knack. The famous pickups that I had sent those to Addison, and I was like, these were uh, the ones that came from Julian, and so we need to make sure that they're right, because I believe one of them was there was a bad coil, or who knows. These things have been sitting, in a box for 20 something years, 24 years, and God knows how long, they've been sitting before that. So amazingly enough, I sent them over to Addison, and then he came to Nashville. I think he was doing some work with Gibson, and he hand delivered those pickups to me. We met for coffee and tea up in Nashville, and I think he was traveling with his wife, but he brings the pickups out, and they're in this little box and so on. And I remember saying to him, "Oh my God, the shipping on the delivery charge is going to kill me on these things." Yeah. He said, "No, actually, I'm here for some work with Gibson. I think they were using him for a consultant or something." And I didn't really get all the information, but we got to spend some time. I'm not sure if Chris Mahoney was there or not. I believe he was supposed to be, but another guy named Greg Lancaster was there, and we got to meet his wife, and they had some tea, and we had coffee. Well, I had tea also because I don't like coffee, but we sat around and talked for a while, and then he was like, "Well, I got things I got to do, guys. I can't stay here forever," and parted company. So as far as I know, those are the same pickups. He just did a little magic to them.
That's pretty cool, isn't it? That is before the internet, really. Julian was sending letters and to people in the States and communicating via letter and posting things with like absolute faith before the advent of being able to send emails and get an instant response. You'd send a letter back then and you have to wait a couple of weeks to get something back if someone even responded. And
oh yeah, in this information, there's a letter from John Page to Julian, and he was saying that he was apologizing, for not getting back to him sooner. But back then, if you heard from somebody, a month or two late, man, what a great response.
Yeah.
But he had gotten a hold of Julian through the mail service and told him, we got the pickups and they're definitely going to go on the guitar, and thank you so much. And I guess they had gone through the Queen. He had taken them to the Queen offices, and then the Queen's offices had sent them to Fender. So, but the thing with Fender was, they just absolutely shot the whole idea down. Yeah. Here you have an international rock star that, by 1983, they're just about to the pinnacle of their careers. And they're one of the largest touring bands in the world. Everybody knows who they are. And to just shoot that whole idea down was, their words to John Page were, "We don't do anything like that, so we're not interested."
Crazy.
Yeah,
Absolutely crazy.
they to me they passed up on, if you're a businessman and somebody throws a golden egg, in your lap, you want to, and they're going to tell you where the goose is, you better start listening,
Yeah.
because you can be very successful with this for everybody. Because even in that article, and Brian had talked about it before, was it would be nice if, people could get this guitar, because it's so unique, and fan letters and, postcards and stuff that came to the Queen offices every day. Where can I get one of these? Where can I get one of these? And then people like Julian and Mark, well, I can't buy one, so I'm going to make one. The story that Julian told was, I bet you I watched that, a dozen times already. Just the idea is like, oh, come on stage and we're going to bring your guitar. And then he was smart enough to take a piece of paper so he
Yeah.
could get a tracing.
Yeah. Wow. And, Julian met Harold as well, which is just one of those things that must have been phenomenal to meet
Oh
Brian's
yeah,
dad.
to meet somebody of that stature. I mean, you know, especially after they broke big here in the States, and his father got to be there that night at the Madison Square Garden, and
Yeah.
they finally figured it out, and even though there was some bad things that happened in the past, it brought them together, and it was all because, well, we don't have money to buy you a guitar, but we'll piece something together for you,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, Brian said it's the irony to me in the podcast, the irony of his dad spending 2 years making him the guitar, then making the guitar together, and then no interest in him actually using it to become a professional musician after he'd helped him build it. So, it's,
Wasn't there a story that somebody tried to trade him away out of that thing
I'm not
years
sure,
ago?
quite possibly.
Yeah.
There's lots of stories and fables around, isn't there, around various elements and bits
Oh,
and
some
pieces
of the
of guitars.
stories I've heard, at these shows, I was in Dallas, and I think it was 2015, and I'm in my booth, and Paul Reed Smith, he was a big supporter of the Dallas Guitar Show, and he comes in my booth, and he was looking at one of the Epic guitars that I built, and I was like, well, I kind of stole this idea from you. He's like, well, we all do that. And then he picked up a Red Special. He looks at it and he goes, I got to work on this. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, the original Shallers, I put those on. I'm like, really? And he told me the story. And, they had the guitar in for, to do some work on it. And it had the mixed up tuners and so on. And according to the story that I was told, and came from the horse's mouth, that he changed them out, put the original Shallers on. And I'm not sure who put the locking ones on. I guess it would be Greg Fryer.
Yeah, it was Greg. Yeah, '98. So
Yeah.
Paul was the reason why they ended up with the Shallers after because he used to have the original Japanese open back Taisco and the one on the G string, which you can see in the Starlix video and you can see live, and then it flips and changes in just before Live Aid.
Yeah, yeah.
It's got the Shallers
So,
on.
and there was a lot of stories that the guitar was taken in, and Paul Reed Smith's shop, and like so many other guitar builders, like, oh, I can build you one of these. And I didn't get anybody to admit it. But the stories that I was told was that Paul had taken the guitar apart and when they found out about it, Queen's people, Brian May's people were furious, because even Andrew Guyton, when he was talking on his podcast, he said the first time he got to see the guitar, he didn't take the neck out, didn't take the tremolo system out, and all that had come apart, and I don't even think John Page took the neck out of the guitar or anything. Now there's some, back in the 70s and 80s, people you took a picture, you had to use a little Instamatic camera, little 110s, and then you take the film, get it developed and so on. Well, along with the stuff that John sent me, there were the little 4x4 Instamatic pictures of the guitar with the pick guard off, and you could see down inside the guitar. Those were totally unreleased. They're sitting in a cabinet over here in my dining room area, and I don't think anybody outside of Fender ever saw them. Nobody knew what was underneath that pick guard. Yeah. Even Guyton, he said, I looked underneath that pick guard and saw that, and he's like, "Oh God, I don't know if I can do this."
No, he did. Yeah, no, it's very true. There's a lot going on under there.
He did a good job. I mean, it was. I've seen some of his stuff over the years, and man, he's a true artist.
He definitely is. But you yourself, Everett, at some point, I can't remember the order, so forgive me if I get it wrong, maybe I'd point it out. I remember finding you and first learning of you on the old Brian May World forum, which used to be on the brianmayworld.net, or brianmayworld.com, which is the red and black website, and we had the forum there, which I think Chris Mahoney was on originally, and then I think you came along. But at what point did you think about your own business and coming up with RS Custom Guitars, and when was that in your story? And tell us a little bit about how that started and who was involved in the early days and where you got to with that.
Most of it started with Chris Mahoney. He's the bastard that started all this. No, actually, Chris was very, very enthusiastic. I met Chris back in like 2000. He had a music store out in Las Vegas, and they were huge. And 9/11 killed everything that him and his family worked for. And Chris came out here, looking for a new life. And he was very enthusiastic about the whole thing. And, he's a businessman. He's like, well, was it Steve Turpin? He was kind of winding down about that time. But KZ was becoming well-known and so on. He's like, if they're doing it, we should try. And I'm kind of like, well, yeah, let's build some guitars for ourselves and so on. And it started to roll, and things started to come together. I built a building out back, that was going to be the shop that we were going to build in. And I don't know if you remember a guy named Tim Zukowski.
Remember Tim? Queen
Yeah,
too.
I was at home, working out in the building one day, and my phone rang. It was Tim Zukowski. And he's like, I'm coming to your house. I'm like, well, who in the hell are you? And he says, I'm a fan. I watch this stuff online. I'm here to do some work. They were in the horse thing. I think his daughter was a veterinarian or studying to be or something. Anyways, it had to do with horses. And he said, I'm about an hour away from your house. If you don't mind, I want to come to your house. I want to meet you. And I'm like, well, okay. I have no idea who this guy is. Never seen him before, never spoke to him before. And he showed up at my house, and we he looked at what I had been working on, my prints and stuff, and he's like, "Who's going to do your hardware?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to have to source it out." I said, "The first few guitars, I guess we'll, you know, uh, just onesie twosie it right here in the shop." And he's like, "Well, I'm a machinist. This is what I do for a living, and I want to build your hardware." I'm like, "Well, here's a set of prints. Let me know what you come back with." I just thought this guy's, full of shit. And he came back with, he's a machinist, and these guys, if you're a good machinist, then he came back with everything spec perfect. And which was kind of good because we used John Page's measurements. And John, when he measured everything, it was, it would be like 1.005, or whatever the measurement was. He measured everything out past the decimal point. So when we laid everything out, on a one-to-one drawing, looked right, felt right, and came out right when it was done off the machine. So I was happy. But I mean, this guy I'd never seen before just shows up at my house with his family. I want to work on this project with you. And I'm like, okay, well, jump on board. And Chris Mahoney, he was working with the guys from Crafters, and because he wanted to accelerate things a lot faster than I did. And I'd say Chris had a lot of energy about this whole thing. And I think he was working with Greg Covington. They were doing amplifiers at the time, the little small DT amplifiers. And he produced a few guitars, but the whole thing with Crafters just didn't work out. They didn't treat Chris the way that he needed to be treated, any customer. So that was kind of downfall for Chris as far as the red special, building red specials. But he worked on it with me, and then he went his own way for a little while, and then he kind of came back into the fold. And today, Chris is in Oklahoma, works in guitar effects. He has his own little business, and he's doing really well. I see him at guitar shows and so on, and have a drink, talk about old times, and hope for the best for the next day, I guess.
It's nice to still stay in touch.
Yeah, but I was finishing up all my drawings and everything, and I bought one of those huge Eklund pin routers, and bought a bunch of equipment out there, and I would spend a couple of hours every day out in the shop before I go to work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I produced a guitar that I thought was pretty good. But I'm no painter. I'm not a painter at all. And I had put an ad on Craigslist looking for a painter. And I get a hold of a guy that was on Craigslist. His name was John Scott. And he was working for a company in Nashville that did painting for the guitar world. It was a regular shop, but he's the owner, Stephen Fazio. He specialized in painting, for guitars and so on. He was a trained luthier, and he also went to some master classes for finishing for Gibson and Fender and so on. This kid was an artist, and John Scott was working for him. And I talked to him on the phone, and I said, I'm doing this guitar, and I would like to get this first one painted. And well, bring it up, So I drive up to Nashville, and you couldn't make this stuff up. I walked into their shop, and there was John Scott, and he's kind of a big fella, and he's standing there at the saw, and I said hello, and John turned his head to look to see who it was, and he dinged his finger with the saw. So the first time I met the guy, he's bleeding. He almost cut his finger off. And he took me upstairs, and I met Stephen and everything. And Stephen was probably 22, 23 years old, maybe. He was young. And I showed him the guitar and told him what I was doing. And he's like, I can help you do that. And I'm like, what do you think? What do you mean? Because I said, someday it would really be great if I could produce these for other people. He's like, that's what we do here, And I said, okay, well, let's get this first one painted and see how. And he's like, oh, if you want, well, we'll do one. And we did one, and turned out okay, because he was a trained luthier. He did a lot of things that, I'm like, this is wrong. We've got to do that. We ended up destroying the guitar. And it grew into it grew into something I thought was kind of special. I mean, we produced, I really couldn't tell you how many instruments, but it was the special part of the whole thing for me was when you would go to a show and people walk into the booth for the first time and they see it, or somebody would come down to pick up a guitar and they open the case for the first time, when they pick it up. And it's to know that somebody's going to appreciate that, that by no means were these things super cheap. They weren't $150 guitar made in China, but the people that were buying them, my thing was, this is an instrument for life. It was for Brian, and I hope it would be for most people that have bought them. They saved their money. Most of them were baby boomers that remember the band, remember Queen, remember Brian May and Starlicks and everything else. And they're, I never liked the Guilds. And now there's something here in the United States that we can get. So it kind of just started with 6 guitars that we've done in a run. And then it just kind of snowballed, we would do 4 to 6 at a time. And, to make sure that we weren't pushing things back too far, because let me tell you about the guitar business. Nobody's on time, ever. You ask anybody that's done a guitar show, they'll tell you, the first time, yeah, we were putting guitars together in the back of a van driving into the show. Everybody does that. But it grew into kind of a little bit of a following. It was a niche thing, and I enjoyed most of the people. I got to really meet some great people. I got to do some great things, and now that I'm older, I'm glad I did it. It was never always fun, but it was fun.
I think often in life, though, at the time, things aren't ever that fun. It's only when you look back later on, you go, that was quite fun. And
oh, yeah. I mean, I remember doing our first show down in Arlington, Texas, and Stephen had been at the shop sleeping in a chair between drying time on, spraying for weeks. And yeah, we were actually putting guitars together in the hotel room and walking over to the guitar show. We'd get one done and go over and so on. And you're up for days at a time. But the adrenaline and everything that's going on around you, it makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. There must be quite a few out there still dotted around the world of your guitars. You see the odd one come up in Reverb or eBay every now and again, but there's still quite a few around, I'd have thought.
Yeah, I actually tried to buy one back, and a guy in California had it in a shop on consignment, and they posted a video that was on Reverb, and I was at work and I called him, because I just didn't have one at the time, and so I called the guy up and I'm like, I'd like to buy this guitar. And he's like, oh, what? You were way too late, pal. I said, well, you just posted this thing. He goes, yeah, well, it didn't last that long, and he's like, I can get your information. And I told him who I was. And he's like, are you the guy that built these? I said, well, there was a team of 3 of us. And it was all, that's one thing I need to tell everybody. There was 3 of us. And, Stephen Fazio and Sean Pedden, me, we were the ones that were starting with a big chunk of wood and ended up with an instrument in a beautiful case. And these guys, since I had my regular day job, they put a lot of time in, and Stephen put his heart and soul into it. And when he had to give up his business, I know it hurt him, but now he works in aeronautical engineer. Oh, wow. So he moved on to bigger and better things. He's actually a rocket scientist.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Just started off with you, Everett, making red specials. So, if you can make a red special, you can make anything.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, there's a lot goes into them, that's for sure. That, as you said, they're not made like regular guitars. And when you actually take it apart and understand the guitar and how the knife edge works and the roller bridge, and then how the guitar goes together and what goes inside and the process, and then having to veneer it, and then the side and all the different elements of it is such a, you really have to. It always amazes me when I think about it and stop and think about it. Usually talking to someone on the podcast, especially talking to you who put them together. But you and I've built one, and we, not necessarily to the scale you have, but when you start speaking to people that have built them and you know how much work goes into it, and then you think back, we've got all these power tools and we've got reference photos and plans and information and photos. The mind of Brian and Harold, when there wasn't something and they were making this out of thin air and coming up with these ideas and whatnot, it's just absolutely mind-boggling at the time in the world that it was, and also that it was a father and this 15-year-old kid making this thing that, as you said, has stood the test of time. And trying to copy it is not easy, even though there's something to copy.
Just the idea of hand making rollers is absurd. Use a CNC machine, lathe that, and a wire machine that cuts out the tremolo system, and I couldn't imagine doing it. You have to have so much patience, and to be 15, 16 years old. When I was 15 or 16 years old, I had an interest in, you couldn't keep me interested in anything.
Yeah.
But he had his father there with him, and it was something that bonded them together for their lifetime. imagine how many kids that really wish that they could have, a small amount of that with their
Yeah,
parents.
definitely. Well, the whole thing is just fascinating, and it is that it's not just the engineering marvel that it is, and the fact that one, it works. Two, I think it looks absolutely stunning, and the design is aesthetically pleasing, which isn't easy to do either when you've got different spaces like the scratch plate and the body, and to get something that's aesthetically nice is quite hard, especially when you're an engineer, because usually engineers are looking at things working, um, and how best they work rather than how they necessarily look on the end of it. And to not, to have hand drawn that rather than to, we chuck it in CAD and go, oh, that doesn't quite look right. We'll shoot that bit off, and we'll print one of them off, or we'll cut one of those on the CNC and have a look, and then go, oh no, we don't like it. We'll edit that bit. But to do it old school with drawings and put it together, it's just mind boggling what they came up with. And I think you're
Oh
right.
yeah.
If you could try and bottle that and have that with your own family or your own father or your own son, what an amazing thing to have done, and then to have as a family heirloom, as a memento, as a token of that bond. But then to go on and become one of the world's greatest guitar players, and in one of the, if not the world's best band ever, and use that thing that you made with your dad for 50, 60 years. If it wasn't true, people would, and you wrote it down, people would think this story would never sell. No one would ever believe it.
I'll give you a little reference story that I've heard from so many different people when I was in the business, and they were all the same story about Brian May. One in particular was he had gone to Westerly, Rhode Island, to the Guild factory, and when they were building those guitars in the early 80s, they didn't have any money. I mean, literally, that company was stone cold broke. And one of the guys, Jay, that worked for Guild, he did some of the photography and so on like that. Well, long story short, they had this, big luncheon with everybody at the factory, and we had this international rock star that was visiting to see where they were going along on this new project and everything. And they had, for the luncheon, it was kind of like a barbecue outside there at the factory. And Brian's there, and everybody's talking to him and so on. And there was a little Fender Squier Stratocaster and one of the little Fender guitars that were sitting around. And Brian's picked it up and started playing it. And Jay said, I know the guitar is a big part of it, but it's in his hands. He goes, he picked up that $100 guitar and started playing it through that $15 amp. And it was Queen. It was Brian May.
Yeah.
And I've heard that story so many times.
No, it's definitely, and we talk a lot about this, and I think about it a lot as well. Is the guitar is really important because of what it stands for. But as a fan of it, I'm guilty myself, obviously, of going to the nth degree to get my own replica Red Special as close to the original as possible. But actually, no matter whether I owned the original or not, I would still sound like me, and I would never sound like Brian through Brian's rig. So maybe some of it is a bit silly to go to the nth degree that I do, but I don't know. It's all different for everyone, isn't it?
It becomes like an obsession.
Yep.
There's some people that are crazy about football. They know everything about every quarterback or whatever. Or there's guys that are crazy about fishing. There's guys that are crazy about hunting, whatever their thing is. This is just something that's caught our interest, and we want to know everything, and there was no real information out there, that Julian had used pictures, and, and he passed some information along to Mark and so on. I mean, one of the guys I met around here, Dustin McGinnis, he was a friend of the forum and so on. And he ended up just living a few miles away from me. I had no idea. But
it's a name from the past, Dustin McGinnis. That's for sure. That's wow, I've not heard that for a while. No, it's crazy, isn't it? In where it's all gone.
He called me one day, and I had sent a guitar to England to have Brian sign it. I had a 93 Guild, and so I sent it, sent a message over there, and they're like, yeah, send it along. So I send it to there, and Brian signs it and everything, and it got shipped back. And the weekend that it got shipped back, Dustin McGinnis calls me. He's like, hey, Brian's going to be playing in Chicago at the some music store. You should come with me. I'm going up there and get my guitar signed. Are you kidding me?
Brilliant.
But but Dustin was hooked up with Mark Reynolds, and
yep.
I got to know Mark, and he was a wealth of information. That's in the 90s. I remember getting a set of plans for the hardware, and making it like the Guild. And I did a few myself. I'm not any way in shape or form am I a really great machinist, but I had all that equipment available to me at GM. So I spent a little of my spare time in the maintenance shop, and I made some parts and so on. And, that really kind of started it. It was a little bit of an itch there,
Yeah.
Because if you had a set of knobs, people were going crazy. Where do I get these?
Yeah. No, I remember myself finding the forum, and it was just before the Burns guitars came out. It's probably a few years before or a year before the Burns guitars came out. So the original Burns guitars, which I have, not one of the originals, but a Burns here. And you couldn't, apart from the Guilds and maybe the KZ, you couldn't get stuff, and no one was selling parts really at that point. So the only way to get them was if, I think at that point, Mark Reynolds had made a few sets of parts for some people to help them out. And then you had a few different people building them. So it was an Italian website where you could buy some for a period of time.
I remember that.
But you couldn't get this stuff anywhere. There was no one making it. You either had to know someone that would, you could owe a favor to later on down the road, or just never get anything because there was just nowhere to get them. So as soon as someone made them, or as soon as someone posted a picture, literally everyone was like, where'd you get that from? Where'd you get that from? It's much different now, where you've got Ron Smith making parts from the cyber shop, where you can get them in 3 or 4 days now if you want to get hold of them. And
he's really turned that into a really unique thing. He met Chris Mahoney, and Chris had some prints, and he made a few parts for him. He didn't do a big run, so the stuff was really expensive. I remember Chris, he was like, oh my God, this is costing me, hundreds and hundreds of dollars for the smallest thing. And then Chris sold a bunch of that stuff off. I think Woody bought a bunch of it. And then I got a hold of him. Oh, excuse me. I got a hold of Chris, and I said, Tim he just, with his job and everything, he just couldn't keep up. And it wasn't becoming cost effective. So I said, who's the guy that you used? And he's like, oh man, it's this guy, Ron Smith. You know, you wouldn't believe this guy. And I think at the time, Ron was doing motorcycle parts, you know, custom motorcycle parts. And he was working for a shop over in Laverne, I think, somewhere here in Tennessee, Gallatin, maybe. They're all in the same area. And so I took some prints over there, and I took them to 3 or 4 shops in Nashville, and most everybody just turned me away, you know. And but I sat down with Chris or with Ron, and he's like, "Let me look through these. I'll get back with you." And he made a couple little changes, you know, to make them easier to machine, and it was on from there. You know, he did a run for me, and then I bought some more parts off him, and he called up one day and he's like, "Hey, so and so overseas, they want to buy some of these parts." You know, I'm like, "Hey, if you can do something with this, more power to you." You know, and it's just grown and grown and grown now.
Yeah.
And you know, he's doing stuff for the what is it, the Time Warp guitars? Yep. Yeah. And when he showed me his stuff, you know, when he had some samples for me, totally blown away. Yeah. You know, and it's turned into a nice little thing for him now that he's retired, and you know, it's all good for everybody.
Definitely, and it's changed so. I mean, it feels so quick, but maybe 20 years isn't that quick. But it's gone are the days where it was difficult to find the information out. There was no book. There was no like Greg Fryer website with all the restoration photos. There was no it was a path untrodden, really.
Yeah.
Back in the day, and it was people like yourself and Chris Mahoney and Tim Zakowski and KZ and Steve Turpin before, and then Andrew Guyton coming on the scene in the early 2000s are really paving the way for what is now our easier access to red specials. And it's a credit to you, because if you hadn't done it, we might not be where we are today. And that's irrespective of how it worked out for you, Everett, and where you ended up. But if you hadn't gone down that path and met some of these people, and you've introduced Ron Smith to the community, and what a fantastic ambassador for the community Ron is, and he's enabled so many people to be able to build guitars that wanted to, that couldn't find parts. And then you've got the whole conversion forum and the whole group of people that work with Woody on conversions, and it's made the community, although you wouldn't have been aware of it, none of us were at the time, it's just made the community so much richer for people sharing information and helping people out. It's just a much nicer place to be now than it ever. Not that it wasn't nice before, but then it could have been, I suppose, is probably the best way.
Woody was another one. He was like Tim. Woody called me, and I was doing the NAMM show. I think it was 2007, and I got invited by an amplifier company, JMI Amplifiers. I had met them in Texas a few months earlier, and through a friend of John Scott and Mark Taylor, excuse me, and we were going to do the NAMM show together. And Woody calls up and he's like, "Hey, you guys going to be at the NAMM show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're going out there and give it a try, And he's like, "Well, I want to come meet you." I'm like, "Okay." Another guy, you met him through the community, and he showed up at the shop, and Woody had bought a couple guitars off me. Some of the first ones, the Natural Supreme, which I guess he just got back. It's changed hands a few times, and it's back in his hands. But I mean, to somebody come all the way from New Jersey to Nashville, Tennessee, just to hang out with us for a little while, unbelievable. And he was telling me about, yeah, I've got this idea, and this is, the way it's going to work out. And it's grown into something big for him. Because of that, he's not doing a 9-to-5 job, someplace he hates. And he's home with his boys. He gets to be with his family. And he's doing something that he really enjoys doing, And God, I wish I could have done that my whole life, but it didn't work out that way.
No, but you've helped him do that. So you gotta remember your part in all of this. It's a good part to play. Have you got one of your original guitars that you made now in your possession?
Well, I got the John Bird. I actually got the pick guard off it because I was changing the color of the wire.
Yeah. So is this your replica of the John Birch guitar?
Mm-hmm. Yep. John.
Very nice.
We changed a couple things on this guitar. The neck angle was way too steep, and it was elongated and so on. But it's kind of a cool piece. This is one of them. You probably end up keeping, and your grandkids end up selling it on eBay because I don't know what the hell it is.
I'm sure they will. You have to force them to watch the podcast so they know how important it is.
Oh well, but everything that I can say that I was a part of all came from this information, this book. And I'll show you it is taken apart right now, but if you can see, the neck is over top of the body. It's not as wide as the neck is.
Yeah.
So if you go through, there's a drawing here, which I'll send you a good picture of it. You see the screws coming through the back?
Yep.
That's how they were going to do the neck, just like do a neck pocket like the Fender and run screws from behind. And I looked at this for god awful long time, as you can see how they were trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
They made that nice little pocket and everything fit in there real good, but it wasn't anything like the original.
So when you got the guitar, you obviously started putting it, the John Page guitar. We're jumping around a bit, but that's fine. You obviously then put it together completely and made the full guitar that it should have been with all of the parts. How much extra bits and pieces did you have to do, or how many other extra decisions did you have to make, or was it all pretty much? Obviously, the neck connection you've just discussed was you've made it more like the original, but was it pretty close to how it should have ended up?
With the drawings and the stuff that I was sent, we did 1-to-1 drawings to begin with, and then laid them out in AutoCAD and looked at them in 3D, cut the stuff out. First thing we did was cut out some MDF to make sure everything's supposed to be where it's supposed to be. Slap it all together, there it was, the red special sitting there on the bench. You're like, where in the hell did that come from? But I mean, that just goes to show you, they used the drawings that everybody has seen, because of the book and so on. If you take those drawings and you line up the cellophane tape markings and so on, and you measure everything out, it's perfect. That's what they were using.
Yeah.
So if you have that information, you pretty much got the uh, roadmap to get you to the red special, and that's what we were using. Now, I did make some changes when when we were RS Custom Guitars. Um, the idea of having exposed screws up underneath the veneer, even if they're countersunk and so on, um, all that stuff moves around, and that ends up cracking veneer and cracking finishes and so on. And I just I didn't want to have that warranty item bothering me.
Yeah.
So uh, wherever there was a screw, we put a dowel pin, put an oak dowel pin in,
Yeah.
and then everything was glued together. I know that uh, on the knife edge, there's the long screws with the big washers that go through the back of the guitar. The way we mounted it and so on. We just never felt that we needed to run screws through the back and have something exposed back there that's going to move around and crack. So I didn't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But to keep it is, to the guy that's not looking for, you know, the pick guard screw to be in a certain place because it's not biting any wood, then, you know, they're excited about getting the guitar.
Yeah.
And then there's the guys like, you know, what do they call them? Ackroids or something?
Anoraks.
Atarax, yeah. Oh man, that screw's in the wrong place. Well, we moved it for a reason, you know.
No, it's all good. There's not, it's. I remember. Oh, there's so many memories of poring over pictures of various red specials as and when they came out, and the excitement of someone new building one and someone getting one and then doing a review or talking about it. It's a really fun time to have been around in the forum back in the day when new information was coming out. It was great. And I'd never realized how much information you'd had, Everett. So
Actually, all this stuff, I went through it so many times trying to figure out what went where, what, this, that, and the other thing. And then, you know, I did have some conversations with John Page. I had conversations with Greg Fryer. I don't think I ever got to talk to KZ. He was at a NAMM show that I was supposed to go to, and then something came up. I couldn't make it, but I think Steven met him. So uh, it's nice to meet uh, the true players in some of this
yeah,
stuff, and to get their perspective on things and see how they're doing things. And, um, KZ's doing some really great stuff, you
yeah,
know.
definitely. His guitars are fantastic, and at the time, I mean, they weren't the KZ Pro back then, were they? They were just a KZ Red
Yeah.
Special, and you could buy one for not a lot of money in comparison to what they cost now. Obviously, everything's gone up, but I remember looking at those photos and think this is something else. His attention to detail at that point and the craftsmanship of those guitars. Because there wasn't YouTube, or YouTube was around, but it wasn't anywhere near what it is now. So, websites would have, like KZ's website used to have, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60 different build photos you could go and look through and spend hours online clicking through and going, oh, I wonder if that's changed. Oh, there's a new photo, or download that in case the internet breaks, and print that out and put it in a file and have a look at it later. This is gone of those
Well,
days.
I was lucky. I had a lot of the Guild guitars, and after I got out of the Navy and got a little more substantial in my life, um, I think it was 1995. I bought a 83 Guild number 153, and I still have that guitar today. So it's been like 30 years, But I bought it used from a session player in Cleveland, Ohio. And this poor guy was freezing to death in this crappy little one-bedroom apartment, and he hadn't worked, and it's winter time, and I went to go buy the guitar, and I thought, well, I probably lowball this guy a little bit. I mean, he's got a chair, a lamp, and a 12-inch TV.
Yeah.
When I looked at the guitar, I said, "Are you firm on it?" He goes, "Look, you wouldn't have drove all the way over here if you did not know what it was worth." So I paid him what he wanted for it, and I still have that guitar today. And that led into this huge obsession where I would buy every guild that I could get my hands on, and that's how I met uh, what Mike Kramer. I don't know if you remember him, but he was huge he had so many of the Guild Brian May guitars, and Ernest from Abalone Vintage Guitars.
Was that Michael J. Kramer?
Yeah, Michael J. Kramer.
Yeah, I remember
Popeye.
Mike.
Everybody called him Popeye.
I remember.
And I, at one time, I had like 150 Brian May guitars
Wow.
that were made by Guild. I had a bedroom that was, you know, two lines of guitars all the way around the room. They were stacked up in cases. And I had some really cool prototypes and some great colored guitars, different colors that you could only get, on a certain run. And unfortunately, I got divorced and I had to sell all that stuff.
Yeah.
But that's meeting Mike Kramer through that was a big deal. He was a friend up until his untimely death a few years back.
Yeah.
And he was a big part of it. And he was hooked up with KC, and I remember when he told me he ordered his, how long he had to wait and so on. And he got the guitar and he was just blown out of the water with it, And he had so many different items or different guitars. It was unbelievable. And sad, we lost him.
Definitely. He was such a big part of the forum as well, the old forum, and he's quite a character from memory. And he wasn't afraid of saying what he thought.
He came down to Nashville on a whim one time. He just, hey, I'm going to come down. We were getting ready to debut the guitars, and he's like, I'm going to come down for it. So he jumps on a plane, shows up here. He stayed with me for, I think he was here 4 days.
Yeah.
And, I met so many great people. One person I met, it turned out to be, he ended up being like my best friend, my brother, and that was Leo Lopez. And I had been watching a Brian May guitar on eBay, and he was bidding on it, and somebody outbid us both at the last minute, And so I get a hold of Leo. Back then, you could just click on his name and gave you all his information.
Yeah.
So I called him up and I said, "Are you looking for a Brian May guitar?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm doing this project." And I said, "Well, I got a new old stock, I'll let you have it for your last bid. You're willing to pay that much, then I'll let you have it for your last reasonable bid." And he's like, "Okay." So he ships it, and we start talking. He's like, "Oh, by the way, I own 2 Guytons." And I'm like, "I don't know anybody that owns a Guyton, He's like, "Well, I got a green one and I've got a red one." He's got the number 10 greenie. And that's how the whole thing came about with the scallop guitar. was Leo had got a hold of Guyton and said, I want a green one. I'll take number 10, but it's got to be scalloped. And Brian's like, nope, no, we're not changing anything for anybody. And so when he called, Guyton called him back, and Leo said, how about if I buy a red one too? I'll buy two of them. And he's like, well, let me talk to him. So he goes back and he goes, guys must be serious. He's going to buy two guitars. And so they got the guitar ready to go and everything. And you get to the part where Brian's he has to sign a headstock. And Brian wrote on the back of it to Leo, do good things. I think that was what it was. And he autographed it. And he played it, and he's like, well, you're going to have to make him another one because I like this one. And Andrew told him, well, this guy's waited, a long time. So, we gotta send this guitar to him. Well, I want one then. So he's got his scallop guitar, and it was on his website for the longest time. Yeah. It said, it's all your fault, Leo.
Yeah.
So I had been talking to him. We became, friends online. And I got these two guitars and so on. And I said, man, I would just love to see him. He says, come on up. Another person I don't know, really. He's like, invites me into his whole world. He meets me at the airport, me and my two friends, with this great big sign, takes us out for breakfast. We go to his warehouse and we're looking at guitars and playing stuff. And, he's got so many great things. And then he's like, oh, I need to show you this project that I was talking about. He had taken that brand new old stock Brian May that I had sold him and butchered it. He changed the wiring and, did some routing on it and stuff like that. And I was a little bit heartsick, but he ended up, doing a lot of the bigger shows with me, and we traveled together. And, God, it's been 20 years. And I speak to him probably 3 or 4 times a week, and we're still friends. It's nice that I got to meet somebody like that just because of the interest in this instrument.
Well, and I think that's the great thing of the internet and the forum back then, and this instrument and what Brian stands for and how Brian does things, because it tends to attract a certain kind of individual. And I always say I've met some of my best friends through this, and they live all around the world, and I speak to them nearly daily. And without this, I don't think I would have such, not that the friends that I grew up with aren't wonderful, and I don't love spending time with them, but when you meet someone that's got a true passion like you do, and you come together through that passion, it's a different bond. And it's really, maybe it's just because we're not doing it in other things, but it feels really unique in the Red Special world when you meet those people that really understand you and your passion and your thoughts on things, and you just click. It's like family spread out across the world. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And to run into some of these people that had worked on all these different projects, we got to meet some of the people that worked on the Brian May guitars in the Guild factory, and the guy that shot the pictures, and the whole story behind the treble boosters and so on. There was just always so many stories. There was a lawsuit because of Pete Cornish and all this. It's all bullshit.
Yeah.
They were expensive. People didn't want to spend the money. They didn't understand it. The the guy that was making them, he made them until they just said, well, we don't have a demand for them, so we're not going to make any more. But now if you've got one today, they're like a block of gold.
Yeah, they are. It's one of those things. Oh, hindsight's a wonderful thing, Everett. If you knew what we knew today, 20 years ago, we'd have all bought and sold and kept hold of different things and been very wealthy probably. But no, it's great. And so the John Page guitar that you've got, what are your plans with that? You going to put that back together again and keep it? Or...
I've got the pick guard off it just because I changed that wiring. It was one of those things where we put it together to take it to Dallas, and I didn't have the right color for the wire for the pickups. So I'm changing strings or something, and I was like, oh, I'm going to look underneath it. Oh, that's always going to bug me. So you take everything apart, and the John Page guitar, I don't know. One of the things I do know it's for sure is I'm at the age where I'm getting ready to retire. This should be my last year working. And where I'm living in Spring Hill, Tennessee, we were lucky enough to find a pretty good sized piece of property. And my wife and I were kind of like newlyweds. We'd been married like 2 years, so how do I say this? We were over enthusiastic when it came to building this house. So built this big house when we were in our 40s. Now that we're in our 60s, we're like, damn, we got to get rid of this big house. Because it is a lot to take care of. And so a lot of the stuff's got to go. I've sold off most of my guitars. God, during all this time, I was buying and selling vintage guitars along with doing this. I've been doing that since the 90s. And that's how I kind of got started and everything. And so I've had people that have shown interest into wanting some of this stuff. And, maybe somebody that has got enough interest in it will say, hey, this is something I'd really like to have. And I'm just not going to be able to keep it, not where I'm, what we're going to be doing with our lifestyle. We want to travel.
Yeah.
And I don't think I want to put all this stuff in another storeroom for 25 years. The guitar will probably get pissed if it gets locked up again.
You won't be very happy when it gets released, that's for sure. No, would it be...
there's probably significant historical value in some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people who go, all you did was finish up a guitar with a neck. Well, we used all the original drawings. We used all the patterns and stuff that John Page had been working on. The original body got burned up in a fire at the Fender Custom Shop one night. So,
well, I'm sure there'll be some interested parties listening to the podcast who might reach out and try and twist your arm, but I can think of a couple of people who I would think would be the right people to put you in touch with if you ever wanted to part with it.
Well,
and I don't mean myself.
Well, being in Nashville, there's quite a few guitar buffs, and it's funny when you run into some of them. And I've been really out of the business 5 or 6 years now, and I'll run in, like, if I go, John Scott owns a shop here in Spring Hill now, and he's really successful, and he has a lot of top players that are using his stuff. and I'll come into his shop. I just took that guild up there to have him tweak the neck for me. And I dropped the guitar off, and you know, there's all these music people in the area. And then when they introduce me, John will say, well, you know, he's the Red Special guy. Oh, yeah, I heard about you. You know, but any other time, nobody knows who the hell I am.
Yeah.
You're just some guy who works at GM. I do have to say that my wife has been absolutely phenomenal about all this. I mean, you know how guys will get obsessed about something and you spend your time talking about it and doing things. And I remember the first time we did the NAMM show, we were all excited. And so we were in there we loaded it on I think a Thursday, and Friday was the first day of the show. And she shows up, you know, she's got an all access pass and everything. And she shows up, and Tim was there, and Leo showed up with his family. He came down to see the show, and Tim was there, helped me run the show. And my wife shows up, and she hangs around, you know, for a few hours, and then she's like, how in the hell can you do this all day long? I said, what are you talking about? You sell the same story over and over. Everybody asks you the same question. Everybody wants to see this. And this is what we're here for. You know, this is the magic for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she never understood it, but she tolerated it very nicely.
Makes a big difference if you've got
Yeah.
a
She was always there, you know, through thick and thin, through the whole thing. I'm very, very, very lucky. I'd like to mention some of the people that, you know,
go for it.
We talked about Woody and Ron Smith and Leo and so on. Deanna Passarella, she was a huge part of our company for 9 years. And she ended up going out to California and building herself a life that she enjoys. And we love her just like she's part of our family. You know, I'm probably guilty of not staying in touch because I'm just not good at that. But we hear from each other now and then, and I watch her life grow, you know, and I'm proud of things that she's done. Stephen Fazio, I saw him, you know, from a little college kid that didn't have the answers for anything, turn into a great husband and a father, and he's a great engineer now, and he did some of the most fantastic work for me that I could have ever prayed for. And Sean Payton he was a godsend. He came out of nowhere, you know, and God, you know, we just so many more that were there to unload trucks and work shows, and everybody that had any part of this, you know, God bless them. And I hope everybody enjoyed the ride because it sure was fun.
No, it definitely comes across. You can see you know, the smile on your face talking about those people. You can see that it really meant a big part to you. And I hope that one or two of them will stumble across this one day and get to hear you talk so lovingly about your time with them, because I think to do that later on, they'd be made up.
I hope I didn't ramble too much, but you know, there's so much to be said, and there's so little time.
Yep.
So,
well, maybe we'll get you back on, and would be a bit more geeky and a bit more into some of the details at some point, or we could maybe have a think about how we might be able to work together to keep some of the information you've got for prosperity for the people of the community, or do something so that it doesn't get lost for forever. Because I think the stories that you've got need to be captured and told and put down somewhere so that future generations can find them, and the history of the Red Special and the twists and turns that it's been through, and the various projects that nearly started then didn't, and then whatnot. That all needs to be recorded, because at some point those stories will die, and that part of the history dies, and it's so important that we try and capture that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm looking at this book right now. The pages, they came out of a regular notebook,
Yeah,
and they're all yellowed now, and some of the writing is getting hard to see, and it's deteriorating with age. I've kept this stuff locked up in a safe, and they was in a sealed bag for years and years, and this stuff's gonna just wither away unless somebody keeps going with it.
yeah,
It's it's just like Brian's guitar. When it's all over, that guitar needs to be someplace that people can see it.
definitely, definitely.
And
And I
I'm
think that
sure that's a consideration with Brian and his family. There's no amount of money that anybody could pay to really own that.
no, and I just feel real. I don't know that it's a responsibility, but I feel like those of us that have been around the forum a long time and have had so much of a wonderful time and experience through tracking the history of the Red Special and being part of meeting people like yourself and talking to you. I remember talking to you 15, 20 years ago and being in touch when you were doing some work on the guitars and building the guitars, and then all the different people I've managed to meet and how it shaped my life and how it's helped me become who I am. I just feel like it's such an important thing for me that we need to keep hold of all this information and all these stories and these wonderful people like yourself who've crafted this community or been part of the foundations of the community, that for future generations to understand where we've come from and why we are where we are, and the Queen fan that's not been born yet who listens to Bohemian Rhapsody in 20 years time goes, oh wow, that's the best song I've ever, who was that? And they goes, that's Brian May from Queen, they were the best band in the world, and he built his guitar with his dad. And then fall down the rabbit hole we've all fallen down. And I just think it's such an important thing to put that information together for those future generations, and for some of us, have heard stories and have heard the rumors and actually pin down and go, no, that's the story of the John Page guitar, that's the story of the John Birch guitar, and that's the actual facts of what happened. I think that's a really important thing for us to try and achieve.
Well, remember, I said earlier about that, you'd see people that would open the case and see the guitar for the first time. There was a little boy, 8 years old, that walked into my booth in Dallas with his mom and his dad. And this kid, if he was 4'2", I mean, he was a little tiny guy. And he shows up in my booth and he says, I want to play one of your guitars. And I'm looking at him. And if you've gone to a guitar show, teenagers and young kids, they learn the Nirvana song and Enter Sandman, and they bash out some chords, and you're like, yeah, you got no money. I don't know why I'm wasting my time. This little fella, his name was Griffin Tucker, little blonde-headed kid. He sat down in that folding chair, and he was so little, his feet would not touch the ground. And I put this guitar, put it over his shoulder, and this, he's up here like this, and I thought he's gonna play, Smoke on the Water or something. This kid just wails. He starts playing Queen note for note. And I looked at his dad and I go, where the hell did he learn that? And he goes, YouTube. I'm like, are you kidding me? He goes, I got him a guitar for his birthday or for Christmas, showed him like 3 or 4 chords, and this kid lives. And I watched this little guy grow over the years. I would have him as, he was an artist for us for a while. Yeah. And he came to the NAMM show and entertained for us. And then every time we would do Dallas, we'd have him and his family come down, and, he would play for us. And he won best guitarist under 20 years old in 2015. And today, it was just about a week ago, he was just spotlighted as number 9 of the top 15, I think it is 10 or 15 influential young guitar players in rock and roll. And I got to watch him grow from a little 8-year-old kid. I think he's 19 or 20 years old now. And we built him a gold red special for Christmas one year. And he was all about that. I got to have this guitar. I got to have this. And he traveled to California and played it at the NAMM show for us. And, guaranteed, if I needed 100 people in my booth, I just put Griffin Tucker in there.
Yeah.
These people everywhere. And watch him grow and do so much with music. And is because he was a fan. That was the only reason.
Yeah. No, it's so special, isn't it? And that, it's what a wonderful thing. Again, by doing what you did and being where you were and having experienced what you did and being in the right place at the right time and meeting him and then being able to watch it. It's just a fantastic story again that's spurred off of a father and son building a guitar out of necessity.
Yeah.
It's amazing, really, when you think about that one act of, Dad, I want a guitar. Sorry, son, we can't afford it. Let's build one. And it's gone across the world, inspired generations. And that it's just fantastic.
And it still happens every day. Somebody will hear that guitar tone on a record or on the radio or something, some young person, and it'll strike that chord in their brain, and they'll be the next one that's obsessed.
Yep. And that's why we need to put the information together. And that's why the podcast is really important, to capture people who've been part of that community and have helped shape it, hear their story and see them and put a face to a name and hear them speak from their own mouth rather than something written down or something that someone else has said, someone said. Because I think that happens sometimes and it's unfair because people hear things, and it's good to hear from the originator's mouth yourself.
Well, I've been lucky, and I've been really glad that I got to be a part of something that matters to people, and my position in life, I've worked for different companies, and they don't care about you. I always tell everybody I'm a musical, or not a musical, but an industrial prostitute. I just sell myself to GM every day, and when I finally walk out of there, it's like it's not going to be a bump in the road. They're not going to notice me gone. And maybe someday when I'm done, later on in life, somebody will say, "Oh, I found this guitar online, and it was made by a guy named Everett Wood. Him and his friends in Spring Hill, Tennessee built this." So not the biggest legacy in the world, but it's a little bit of something.
Yeah, I definitely think on reflection, hopefully through us talking today as well, you'll realize, although you think it's just a little part, you've been a bigger part in the last 20 years of this Red Special phenomenon that's been created in the online community. And you've been getting the Birch guitar back to Brian, the original Birch guitar back. That's a massive thing and a massive feat to have done the detective work.
Let me tell you, there were so many people that came crawling out of the woodwork, and it's like, just tell me where it is, and I want it, no matter what the cost. I'm not going to give that information to anybody. Yeah. There's only one person that deserved to have that back, and that was Brian. No,
but that's part of the history, and that's we all remember the story and the gig, and we all now know where it ended up and why it disappeared and how it got back to him. And that's a fantastic thing to go full circle on the story. And know that it ended up back in the right hands. And if that wasn't you, Everett, it might not have happened. So that one little story alone puts you in the big part of the Red Specials history and Brian May's history, and that you should be
And it all started with a
mindful.
dollar magazine.
There you go.
There you go. Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad that we got to talk, and it's a real honor to be part of this and talk with you again. Maybe we'll do it again sometime soon.
Definitely. I'd love to speak more about some other ideas I've got, but we'll do that in a minute. Everett, thank you so much for your time today. It's been fantastic catching up with you again after all these years, and then to see you so well and to listen to your stories and hear about the history of you in the Red Special. Thank you for your part, and hopefully everyone listening will enjoy it as much as I have enjoyed listening to you and talking to you today.
Well, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate everything. You have a good day.
You too. Cheerio.
All right, bye.
Now, what a fantastic episode that was with Everett. Everett, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I know it took a few months for us to finally get together and to get you on, but I had found such an interesting time chatting to you and reminiscing about the good old days of the Red Special Guitar community back before the Facebook page ever existed. And yeah, thank you so much for sharing all those details with us. There's some great photos you sent me, which are posted up alongside the video, and it was great chatting to you and being back in touch with you after all this time. So thank you so much for your efforts of coming on the podcast. I know it's a lot of time chatting to me for 2 hours, but well worth it for documenting your story. So thank you again. Just a quick reminder that coming out soon, we will have these wonderful podcast coins, which I like that. We also have the limited number of It's Slate slates, which will be coming out soon. We mentioned about the US meetup in April, the US meetup in September, October time, and then the UK Red Special Guitar meetup. Don't forget that you can head over to the Etsy page and pick up a UK Good Company t-shirt. You can also check out the slates will be going on the Etsy store, as will the coins. So make sure you head over to that. There'll be a link in the description below to the Etsy store. But make sure you head over, like the store. You'll see when new things come available. There's some other bits and pieces coming out as well, which is great. Show your support for the podcast. Also, I want to shout out to the podcast patrons. You guys absolutely rock. There is far too many of you to name you all, but you all know who you are and you keep this thing alive. Thank you for your support, your time, your effort, and your trust in me to keep doing this. And yeah, I can't wait to see where 2023 takes us, what's going to happen at the meetup this year in the UK. And yeah, I just can't wait to see where we go. So keep safe, everyone, and I will catch you in the next one.